Hey Dave, it's great being back here.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final installment of our four-part SD Times Live micro-webinar series that has been looking at the four pillars of observability. I'm Dave Rubenstein, editor-in-chief of SD Times, and with me again is Laurent Haimovich. He's the co-founder and CTO of developer-first observability company Rookout. How you doing, Laurent?
I'm doing great. How
Good,
about you? Where are you,
good.
where are you today?
Today I am in the beautiful New Jersey shore in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Nice.
So
Hope you're having a
yeah,
good time.
hopefully we'll get a lot of people to watch this so we make a little money and I can go back to the craps tables. But we'll see how
Don't lose
that.
everything in one place.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So anyway, so folks, if you're just joining in for the first time, the first three episodes of this series are available on sdtimes.com in the Learning Center. But just to give you a quick recap, in part one, we established snapshot as the fourth pillar of observability. And part two explained how snapshots are so much better than logs, which we've determined suck. Part three looked at how to cut costs by implementing developer-first observability. And today's session will take on troubleshooting and debugging across the software development lifecycle. Okay, Laurent, so good to have you with us again, and let's get into it. So as
Now,
organizations look to, they're told developers everything has to shift left, we're starting to see that the life cycle itself is moving a bit to the right to include more things, security testing, everything else involved. So what are some of the challenges, though, associated with that that would impact development teams?
yeah. So the way, shift left, shift right, it's to a great degree a matter of perspective. We're seeing that on the one hand, a lot of companies are trying to give more developers responsibility, which is shifting left in a way. But in the same is in the same way they're shifting left, giving them more responsibility. They're in the same way, in fact, shifting right because they're moving them from the lab to the field, to production, to the cloud. They're moving them all around, and they're giving them tools. And in fact, in many ways, we're seeing that labs today are becoming much more similar to production than in the past. I mean, if you think about it in the past, most people, especially running the monolith, would just spin it up on their laptops and be done with it. Today, with microservices, with PaaS, with database as a service or data structures as a service, AI as a service, all of a sudden, you can't just spin up the application on your machine. You spin it up either hybridly with some cloud services or you spin it up completely in the cloud. And all of a sudden, that spinning up that repository you're working on for in the low world and seeing everything working end to end, all of a sudden, this is happening in a Kubernetes cluster in the cloud, in some serverless function in the cloud. And your development environment is all of a sudden way more similar to the production environment than it ever was. And most of the developer tools that you're used to are no longer applicable.
Okay. So that's
Now,
interesting. So that kind of addresses some of the challenges involved in the environments that developers are using. So what about testing? How is that fitting into this? What are some of
yeah.
the
So
challenges there?
both in testing and in development environment, we seeing the developers have stopped relying on traditional developers tools. They don't use the debugger anymore. They don't use the process monitor. They don't look so much at the file system because all of those paradigms aren't relevant anymore more in the world of the cloud, in the world of distributed systems. And all of a sudden, they're shifting their focus to use observability tools, to use logging, to use metrics, use traces, and obviously to use snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, most of those tools, snapshots aside, were not meant for debugging. They were not meant for troubleshooting.
Right.
And they definitely were not meant to be used in early stages of the life cycle where the system is not supposed to be working properly. I mean, if you look at, at a production environment and you're seeing a error rate rise above 3%, and something is terribly wrong and you need to fix it. But if you look at development environment or a test environment, it's much more expected that error rates are going to go up because you've just written some new code. There are going to be some bugs. Things are going to go wrong. And all of a sudden, it's not so much about detecting when things are going wrong as it is about troubleshooting. Why are they going wrong? How deep can I get to figure it out? I mean, let's say in production, if you deploy a new version and all of a sudden error rates are spiking, just roll back. Everything's good. It's broken. It's not good enough. Quality is subpar. Send it back to testing. But if you're in testing and error rates are spiking, rolling it back isn't going to help you in any way, shape, or form. What you now have to do is figure out why our error rates are spiking and fixing that. And that's not something observability tools have been particularly good at traditionally. But all of a sudden, developers are relying on them more and more and more to do just that, to troubleshoot, to do white box testing, to do black box testing, to identify why things are not perfect and how to fix that. And you're seeing that's a huge reason why there's such a rise in developer-first observability, in developer observability tooling, because developers are joining the observability party, whether they want to or not. The environments they're now working on, development, testing, are way more production-oriented, and they need observability tools to do that.
Yeah.
And I think the final piece of that is the testing production paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly heard from developers that they do want this type of observability, so that they can deliver more effectively, deliver more quickly. If they find errors earlier, it's less costly to repair, obviously, than if you find it later on after deployment, things like that. So I guess from where you're sitting, you're seeing the demand for this type of observability tool to make their way into developer hands.
Definitely. Early in the days of Rookout, we were surprised to find that some of our customers were using Rookout 5 times as much in pre-production as they're doing in production. And we sold them a production debugger. We sold them a production observability tool. And all of a sudden, they took that tool and used it so much more in staging or in development. Quite often, they were shocked by it. We were shocked by it. But that's what developers need today. They need production-grade tooling for non-production environments. And the observability is no exception to that.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, when you think about shift left versus shift right, we're hearing more and more companies talk about testing in production. It's so much, we want developers to care about what's happening in production. There are so many shifts, so many small details that's hard to simulate in pre-production, whether it's how systems are configured, whether it's the load of the system, whether it's human behavior. And more companies are moving the definition of done to verify something is working in production, potentially making the impact it wants, whether it's a technical impact or a commercial impact or a user experience impact. And more companies are now actually reducing the quality they are listening to production with by adding other safeguard, whether it's canary releases, whether it's A/B testing, whether it's other tools that allows them to take a risk to roll out something that's not as heavily tested to production, because they know that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how much you test in the lab. You're going to learn so much more by testing in production. You're going to see the real impact of what you're working on, the real value of what you're working on. And so many organizations are shifting that paradigm. We don't have to spend so much time testing pre-production. If at the end of the day, a single error in production that we can never find earlier in the process is going to send us all the way back to the drawing board. So let's fail fast. Let's get to production faster. And we're actually seeing that more and more of our customers are doing away with staging environments. They're very heavily focused on good development environments. They're building a lot of testing, and especially they're building a lot of heavy guardrails that allow them to know that the code they're deploying is reasonably quality, and that any issues it's going to cause are going to be very localized and not going to have any significant impact. And this way they can test code in production very, very early. Now, obviously, if you allow lower quality code in production in a managed way, which I think personally is good if you know how to manage it and cooperate with the business on it, because you're going to get so much more velocity, you need better troubleshooting tools, because all of a sudden your engineers are going to be debugging in production. Your engineers are going to be figuring out what's wrong in production even more. And companies are seeing huge benefits of that but it's all about setting the right tools and processes in place to enable developers to operate safely in production.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember people used to say that if you were testing in production, you were actually testing at all. You were just releasing into the wild and then waiting for feedback to correct problems. But in the new complex world that we're living in of application development and delivery, it almost, as you pointed out, is necessary to test in production because you can't recreate a lot of those situations in a lab. So I think that's an important takeaway for everyone.
Yeah. Whenever engineering or product teams come to me overconfident in how successful and how easy the launch is going to be, I know they're underestimating the perils of the real world.
Right. Exactly. Good. All right. So as we wrap up this series, Laurent, if you would, maybe in a minute or so, describe how, Rookout kind of approaches these challenges and can help developers, get through some of these things.
So Rookout is a platform for developer-first observability. We kind of take a two-pronged approach to the challenges of observability. The one is we take all the traditional pillars of observability. We take logs, we take metrics, we take snap traces and spans, and we kind of pivot on them. We make them more developer-friendly, more code-aware, more agile, especially more agile, easier to adapt in real time, rather than just fire and forget and leaving you very helpless in times of trouble. You get a lot more control in real time over the data being collected. And even more important, I think one of the things, our number one feature is the snapshot, which is, as we've discussed, is the fourth pillar of observability. And we're seeing more and more major observability player hedging into that. As snapshots, nobody as advanced as ours, but we're seeing more and more dedication to that. And snapshots offer a much better picture. I like to say that a snapshot is worth 1,000 log lines. It offers a much more detailed picture of what's going on within the code. It ties the variables of values and types into the code versions, the stack trace, everything. You get a very accurate picture of what's going on in your code right now, and you can collect it from literally any line of code, anywhere, anytime. Whenever you have a question as a developer, then snapshots is usually the easiest way to answer it.
Fantastic. All right. So that was Laurent Haimovich, co-founder and CTO of Developer First Observability Platform Rookout. Thanks so much for being here and creating this series with us. I think it's been very informative. And again, I would just remind our listeners that they can hear the entire 4-part series. It's all on sdtimes.com for replay and review to your heart's content. All right. So until next time, folks, with our next series, I'm Dave Rubenstein, editor-in-chief of SD Times. So long for now.